Hello, good morning. I hope that you're all enjoying the conference so far. Yes? I do want to let you know that 6 weeks ago, I did give birth to my child. And the reason that I mention that is this conference sort of feels like another baby of mine. Anyway, so I just published my work for the second time, so I felt that I must be here because this is my passion. And I assume that most of you in the audience are here because you have a passion for art, literature, reading, or deaf studies. Maybe that's not your specific area, but I'm just curious about your experiences, and I'm so happy that you're all here. I teach here at RIT and TID, and I'm excited to be teaching about deaf literature with a focus on intersectionality as well as deafnicity and deaf authors. I currently teach writing, but next semester I'll be teaching a deafnicity course. So I'm also interested and open to any of your feedback. And I know, of course, I can't show you all of my work today, and maybe some of you are familiar, maybe some of you aren't, but here we are. There's two important terms I'll be discussing: deafnicity and intersectionality. Yesterday, there were 3 different presenters that spoke about the meaning of intersectionality. There's a few different signs for intersectionality. I typically use this one, and I'll explain my reasoning for that in a bit. Another important word for my presentation is deafnicity. So first, I have a question for all of you. Do you know the meaning of deafnicity? A show of hands? 2 in the front here. Perhaps you've seen that word before. Okay, a few of you have seen that word. But more of a, you've seen it, but you're not really sure of the meaning. Well, before we jump into this, there we go, here's the slide. There's 3 parts. There's theory, experience, and literature. The first part with theory, I'd like to expand on that a bit. The theory we have is from a man named Richard Eckert. He's also an author in this same topic. He's actually here selling his artwork. It's woodworking. I haven't seen him yet, but say hello if you do. But just because this is from theory doesn't mean that it's not based on any evidence. It's not just some made-up thing put into the academic world. There is a foundation and a basis in culture based on how we sign. I'm sure you've seen deaf people saying, "Oh, you're deaf, I'm deaf, same." I'm sure you've seen that before. Show of hands. You see that frequently. You sign deaf, same. And that's what it means is deafnicity. That's a basic definition of deafnicity. Now, the English translation is deaf, same, but the meaning of it is deafnicity. There's 3 authors of this book called People of the Eye: ethnicity and ancestry. Those are Lane, Pillard, and Hedberg are the 3 authors. Now there's 2 different definitions of deafnicity. The first one is really based on ancestry, and that primarily focuses on the history back in England when people came over on the Mayflower to the US and settled here, specifically in the Martha's Vineyard area, and how deaf people were concentrated in that area and how they spread over the eastern coast of the US. But that doesn't mean that they were the only deaf people. There were already indigenous deaf people here, but that definition doesn't focus on that group of deaf people. But there isn't only that ancestral aspect to it. It's not all about generations of deaf families. It also focuses on how people find their deaf family through socialization, meeting other people that are like them. I'd like to add that when I talk about socialization, I mean ethnic groups in general. I don't mean just deaf individuals. I mean ethnicity as a social construct, things that are made up in society based on our sense of belonging. And that applies to any ethnic group. This is a quote from a book that talks about ethnic kinship, that familial bond, which is created by culture and how that happens through socialization, that creates that sense of family, that sense of belonging. And the strongest way to do that is through language, or specifically sign language. It's the most important aspect. Eckert's work really influenced my definition of deafnicity and what it means. Before, I had seen some parallels between ethnic groups and deaf culture, but I didn't have to do all of this new research because people have already said this in the past. This research has been done since the 1980s. It comes up again and again, that concept. But it didn't really have a strong basis until Eckert went ahead and put that into writing, the theory of deafnicity. And he really showcases that relationship between language, community, and ontology. That's my interpretation of his definition. He uses a different word, not ontology. It's the Greek word for that. I can't remember exactly the spelling of that Greek word. And it translates to the English word for religion, which I think is a bit confusing because it's not a religious concept. But if you read his publication, you'll understand what I mean and what he means by ontology. And deaf people who are born deaf, how that influences their thoughts, their being, and how they exist in the world as a person. Now, I don't want you to be distracted by all the words on this slide, so I'm going to condense what this means. As I mentioned previously, generally ethnicity does apply to the deaf group, but in general, sociologists, people who study socialization and groups of people, they say that ethnicity is a struggling relationship based on outside influences and how the world views us, and then our own self-identification, how we feel about who we are internally. There's that constant struggle between the two. This means that ethnicity is a process. It's figuring out who we are and how we feel, and then how the world views us as well. There are strategies to change this. We have to decide our self-identity boundaries and the cultural context within those boundaries. So with my research, I focus primarily on deaf literature within various contexts and the theory involved with that. That's my work. And I'm trying to see if deaf literature, deaf studies, and deafnicity can cross race, national boundaries, and various ethnicities. Not everyone agrees with that, but that's my perspective. My argument is that deafnicity is not limited to white people. It's any race, any national origin. It's not limited. It's just that sense of belonging anywhere you go. It doesn't mean it always happens, but it can happen. Now, the reason I keep mentioning deaf literature and its importance is we need to talk more about this. I studied deaf literature, but that concept of deaf lit was not in my program when I pursued my PhD in English. There was no content. I had to do this on my own and figure out where this deaf literature was and seek it out. Because we are a cultural group. We have deaf culture, so where is our literature within our community? We are an ethnic group as deaf people. Also of added importance is supporting the use of sign language as a human right. For example, the World Federation of the Deaf, they fight for the rights of people to use their signed languages all over the world. The UNCRPD, the Convention of Human Rights for People with Disabilities, well, the WFD partners with them to negotiate laws for people in the deaf community, to break down barriers for people with disabilities. And if we were recognized as an ethnic group, that would allow for more recognition of our rights, separate from our disability. I don't mean that deaf people aren't disabled, but we do experience barriers based on how the hearing world perceives us. But we also have our own ethnic group. In regards to intersectionality, there were 3 other presenters here that discussed this topic. Yesterday was Regine Moges. Bridget Klein also presented yesterday. Her presentation was about being a deaf lesbian. And then this morning, Christy Merriweather, discussing her experiences with intersectionality. So I hope that by now all of you know what intersectionality means, right? You're all done? You know all there is to know? I just want to make sure one last time, I don't want anyone leaving here questioning the meaning of it. So intersectionality, let me clarify by explaining what it's not. Often you see intersectionality signed like this. And when you see that sign, it's a bit confusing. Perhaps it means many identities all into one. People think that that's what intersectionality is. Many different identities, different groups. For example, I'm white, hearing, straight, man, able-bodied. Many groups that someone belongs to. Perhaps you're a father, a son, all those different groups, right? That's intersectionality? It's not. That's why I like to use a different sign that I learned from one of my colleagues and friends, Alicia Allen. She signs it like this. The fist represents our identity, who we are as a person, and then the other hand shows systematic oppressors. And that shift. We're not oppressed all the time. It might change depending on the situation. We're not discriminated against all the time. But we could be discriminated against for race, gender, sexuality, for your abilities. That's intersectionality. For example, if you're a hearing white woman, you may experience sexism, but that's one thing. That's not intersectionality. Because that's one thing. I'm talking about systematic oppression that happens again and again. That's intersectionality. It's more than just one instance. This is really an issue for Black women, specifically barriers in the legal system. Because perhaps you have a Black man in the court system. Well, he's still a man. Or discrimination against a white woman. Well, she's still white. But Black women, they have a very unique experience. That's intersectionality. I hope that clears the definition up for everyone. So why are we highlighting intersectional experiences for deaf people of color? Well, because intersectionality is really rooted in race. And I'd like to speak a bit about, a lot about, Regine Moges and her work. She wrote a book called Innovation in Deaf Studies, The Role of Deaf Scholars. And this is an excerpt from her book. It's a really wonderful book. Well, she wrote a chapter called Cripping Deaf Studies and Deaf Literature, Deaf Queer Ontologies and Intersectionality. From what I've seen, she's the first person to talk about intersectionality within deaf people. And she mentions in the book, she calls herself a self-identified intersectional deaf lesbian of color. I want to mention there's only a few deaf scholars who talk about intersectionality. I'm one of the few, and my literature hasn't been published yet, so this is my first time telling all of you in the audience my thoughts about intersectionality. So it's interesting. I've had my own internal analysis and dialogue, but I haven't actually engaged with Regine in person yet. But after reading about her thoughts, I agree with much of what she says, but I also have my own views too, and that's what I'm sharing with all of you today. The question of if you can have intersectional deafnicity. Now, Moges says that you have to be careful with the concept of deafnicity because that concept of sameness assumes that all deaf people are exactly the same, with the same experiences, and you can't do that. Deafnicity is more of what was said this morning. Being a Black deaf woman is different than your deaf same. This is based on the concept of oppression being one type of oppression experienced universally. That's what it seems to promote, so you have to be careful with that. This quote says, I regard deaf same as an overpowering narrative that risks reducing deaf people's multiple ethnicities to a singular deaf ethnicity. And that's the problem. I agree with that concept, that you need to be very careful. I've also noticed that the intersectional experiences of deaf people of color tend to be recognized as already ethnic. When you see the color of their skin, you assume that they're a person of color. It's like when people ask the simple question, oh, where are you from? And someone says, North Carolina, from Chicago. But it's the concept of asking that. Is it because of my accent? Is it because of the color of my skin? It's hyper-ethnic. So I'd like to do some more research about that topic. So my argument is that we need more analysis about the relationships and kinship of deaf people of color. When we discuss theory and analyze it, we must add that aspect. So I want to make sure that I do that myself in my own research. Raisonné presents a significant reminder about the conceptualization of deafnicity. It should not erase or overpower sign language people's multiple ethnic or racial identities for the sake of a unifying power. It should not overpower people's individual experiences. But my argument, something I would like to add, is I truly believe unity can be promoted and a transnational deafnicity can be acknowledged across many countries, while also protecting and recognizing intersectional sign language persons who not only experience one deafnicity, but other ethnic identities. It's important to recognize both. Because I think the bigger picture for me is the argument about deaf literature and the power of deaf literature. I think with Nancy Rourke's presentation this morning about deaf art and how that influences deaf children and gives them good self-esteem, the power of art, it's the same as the power of literature. Just like Christy said this morning in her presentation, seeing Black deaf characters gives you that sense of power and that sense of belonging. So I believe that yes, in literature there should be deaf characters. That's really important. And one of my arguments in regards to human rights, if the whole world understood the deaf experience and what it's like for us, then they would recognize why we have to fight so hard for our rights to our sign language, rights to our culture, and why we cherish it. So that's why I feel that both are important. Yes, we need to protect intersectionality, but we also must support deafnicity over various nations, races, and ethnicities. This is a personal quote. The personal is political. For example, I recently mentioned that my baby was born about 6 weeks ago now. That's personal, but it's also political. You may be wondering how it's political. Well, my baby is deaf. 4th generation deaf. So what does that mean for the future of my family? The theory of deafnicity really is based on our personal experiences and our personal stories. That influences what deafnicity really is. There are very few people that talk about intersectionality and deafnicity. Myself, Raisonné, Elena Ruiz Williams, Meredith Burke, V.E. Chong, and Napawan Chanarong. We co-authored this chapter in the book, and we're really the only scholars that wrote about intersectional deafnicity thus far. Well, published authors anyway. What I find fascinating about Raisonné is that while she does caution people that deafnicity can overpower ethnic identities, she did share this personal story, an experience where she experienced deaf same, and it showed the benefit from that encounter. Her quote says, "I had a personal experience of deaf same during an assembly, watching several deaf children. When a teacher asked me to introduce myself, approximately 90 school children guessed that I was a European and a hearing person. Correcting everybody on that stage, I fingerspelled my name in Eritrean fingerspelling, Rezennettssegay. All the children's little flapping arms dropped and their eyes widened. They realized instantly that I was an Eritrean from learning my name. When the teacher and pastor communicated with me in sign language, the deaf children saw that I was deaf too, just like them. Soon after, they swarmed, asking, 'You deaf same?' I replied with the Eritrean word for yes. The next question was, 'Are you Eritrean too?' And I responded yes again in my native language. I experienced this double sameness as an advantage. We had that bond. In regards to my own intersectionality, I do experience benefit related to deafnicity, so I'll give you a little bit of background as to who I am. I'm a mixed-race deaf woman, and if we go back to the definition that Eric gives about language, community, and ontology, well, related to community, I am 3rd generation deaf, but I also have that relationship overseas and cross country with other deaf people through socialization. My native language is ASL, but also my ontology as a deaf person. My way of being in the world is different than that of a hearing person. However, yes, I experience deafnicity, and I do value that part of my identity being deaf, but I'm also already ethnic. I'm Polish and have Mexican heritage and family, as well as a transnational Latinx sign language persons community. This ethnic identity is not the same as my race, which, although mixed, passes as white. On my father's side, I'm also Irish and African American, as well as Cherokee. The reason I don't include those parts of my identity is because if we go back to the definition of ethnicity, it means being involved in the community, the language, the culture, etc. And I don't have that part of the culture. I'm not well versed with Black culture or Cherokee culture or Irish culture. I wasn't part of those communities. And my Black grandfather died when my father was young, so I never had the opportunity to get to know that part of my family. So I miss that big part of my possible identity. But I do recognize and cherish that as part of my mixed race background. My deaf is not your deaf. This is a chapter from a book, Realizing Intersectional Realities at Gallaudet University. This is written by the 4 authors I previously mentioned from a book called It's a Small World, International Deaf Spaces and Encounters. These 4 people were grad students at Gallaudet, and they experienced various barriers there. So they share their experiences and the importance of discussions on intersectionality within deaf studies. This group realized that there is a scarcity of intersectional deaf studies work published by deaf people of color or by deaf disabled people. Deaf studies is dominated by white deaf people and deaf-sighted and able-privileged people. Meredith Burke mentions her experience with people asking her if she's deaf first or disabled first. And that neglects the deaf-disabled intersectional experience. Elena Ruiz Williams, she presented here yesterday. She tends to struggle with what it means to be deaf. Quote, racial and ethnic identity had to be secondary to deaf identity, which meant that my queer, Chicanx identities and my person of color identity were dismissed and sidelined. V.E. Chong, he discusses his experiences at Gallaudet and his frustrations with barriers that came up during his time there. But in the end, it led him to feel freer in expressing his multiple identities as a Chinese, Malaysian, gay deaf man. Nepowan Chanarong. While navigating Gallaudet, she positioned herself as a deaf international Asian woman, arriving at a deeper understanding of the experiences of discrimination she had faced during her time in the United States. So the importance of this book chapter, and really my argument and what I agree on, is multiple marginalized representations must be brought to the forefront, making the academic the personal. It's essential that we recognize intersectionality. Okay, so I see that time is running out. Really, my goal for today's presentation on deafnicity is, since I'll be teaching deafnicity next semester, I need more time to have discussions and do more research and analyze this topic. So feel free to take pictures of my PowerPoint, or the last slide does have my name on there. You can feel free to email me, and I'll send you a nice clean copy of my PowerPoint. You don't have to rely on blurry photos from today's presentation. These stories and poems receive little to no attention in academia. And as Regine mentioned, even more discouraging is the infinitesimal number of texts by deaf people of color and by transgender and deaf disabled authors who are queer and experience additional intersectionalities. It is true that there are few texts on this topic, but we can't just forget about it. It's worthwhile to do our research and read through them. There are rich, meaningful, important things that I would like to share with you. What I'm showing is 3 different collections or anthologies. The first book is called Step into the Circle: The Heartbeat of American Indian, Alaska Natives, and First Nations Deaf Communities. Another book is called Eyes of Desire 2, a Deaf GLBT Reader. There's a first version as well, but that's the second one. And then finally, Deaf American Poetry. Christy mentioned that this morning in her presentation. There are a lot of white deaf people in that book, but there's also intersectional or Black deaf poets featured in that book. Okay, 5 minutes. Oh, I'm sad we only have 5 minutes left. Forward, this is a chapter from the book Step into the Circle. I want to emphasize a few words from this passage. Do you see the 2 bolded words there? In this book, you will find true stories of persons who have struggled between worlds: deaf and hearing worlds, native and non-native worlds, urban and reservation worlds. They have struggled to find balance. They've strived for civil rights. They have fought for respect and honor. Any native can tell you what it feels like to be disrespected by people who say they love you. So can any deaf person. To be both indigenous and deaf, deafblind, or hard of hearing poses unique challenges. This is true whether one is full blood or mixed blood, whether one is traditional or progressive. It is true whether your first language is signed or spoken, whether that language is native or Western. It's true whether your primary culture is deaf or hearing, or if it's Indian, Inuit, or Euro-American. Each individual has experiences and stories that can touch our heart. Each individual can be part of the circle. To be both. Now, mind you, this was written before intersectionality became a hot buzzword. It's important to remember that. This word was not in use yet. But that concept, to be both, that shows the concept of intersectionality throughout history. But the one negative of this definition is the concept of primary, whether you're hearing or deaf. The word primary you have to be careful with. You don't have to decide which is first. We're just all both. This short story really touches the heart. It's very powerful. It's about a family that sends their deaf Apache daughter to a deaf school because on the reservation she was struggling, she wasn't happy in that school, so they put her in a deaf school. But they were worried that she would lose her Apache identity. But finally they realized that she was a beautiful, strong, independent girl. She was all of those things in one. She didn't have to lose her Apache identity by going to the deaf school. She could maintain all of her identities. This is a song written by a deaf native person by the name of Terry Herkimer. And it's interesting just to read about the negative experience with native culture, because typically sign language is seen as a positive thing. It's just an interesting perspective. Eckert, the one who wrote the theory on deafnicity, he's a native person himself, and he wrote one of the few creative stories in this book. Most of the accounts are based on personal experiences and just documented about people's lives, but this is a creative story. It's one of the few featured in this book. Another excerpt from Eyes of Desire 2. This is an excerpt from Christopher Smith about how he struggled to find role models back in his day. Chris identifies as a deaf, gay, black man, and he talks about how he would impersonate Lena Horne. She was a hearing black woman, but he was fascinated with her and would copy everything she did. He felt that he was missing role models, but that's where he found inspiration. And he thanks her for teaching him how to be proud of himself as he is. This is an experience from a deaf, gay, Hispanic man named Larry Gray. And he says, deaf, gay, Hispanic. These three words comprise the bulk of my holistic identity. I, deaf, lesbian. It's interesting to see her mom's words at the top here. She says, now that you're gay as well as deaf, life's going to be really hard for you. You're adding something on by being gay. They're seen as separate things. But Sarah says, no, I'm happy being deaf and gay, as they are my identities. If these identities were taken away from me, life would definitely be a lot harder, as I wouldn't know who I am. Oh, only a minute left here. Okay, so this is a beautiful story it's a coming-of-age story about two women that fall in love. They're girls in India. This is a collection of poetry that I wanted to show, but we ran out of time. 30 seconds left. This is a heart-wrenching poem. It's not about being deaf or being black, but it's written by Linwood Smith. It was mentioned this morning. It's a very powerful and sad poem. This is a simple poem about the deaf mind. Think here, see hearse. See speech, feel sad. Must talk, think lack. See sign, me smile. This is another poem by the same person, Abiola Haroun. It's titled The Deaf Negro, The Experience of Black Slaves. There's two final slides here. Save the best for last. I mean, they're all good, but Christy Meriwether. This is called It Was His Movin' Hands, and it's a collection of poetry. And it talks about her observations of Black men, both hearing and deaf, in regards to their hand gestures and signs.